Maya Chen sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria, picking at her synthetic protein meal while the other students laughed and whispered behind her back. At 17, she was small for her age, barely reaching 5 feet tall with quiet brown eyes that seemed to absorb everything around her. The other students at New Geneva Academy saw her as just another unremarkable human girl from the outer colonies, someone who barely deserved their attention. "Look at the little human trying to eat real food," sneered Zark, a tall Altarian with blue-scaled skin and 4 arms. His friends, a mix of different alien species, chuckled at his joke. Maybe we should tell her that protein paste is probably too advanced for her primitive digestive system. Maya continued eating, her expression unchanged. She had heard worse insults during her 3 months at this prestigious intergalactic academy. Being one of only 12 humans among 3,000 students made her an easy target. Most of her classmates came from the core worlds of the Galactic Federation, their families wealthy and influential. They saw humans as recent additions to galactic society, barely evolved beyond their home planet. "I heard humans still use projectile weapons in combat," added Vex, a crystalline being whose voice sounded like wind chimes. "How primitive. My people mastered energy manipulation before we even developed spaceflight." The table erupted in more laughter. Maya finally looked up, meeting their eyes with a calm that seemed to unnerve them slightly. She had learned long ago that showing emotion only encouraged bullies. Instead, she simply returned to her meal, as if their words meant nothing to her. What they didn't know was that Maya had been dealing with far more dangerous enemies than academy bullies for most of her life. What they didn't know was that the quiet girl they mocked had once brought an entire star empire to its knees using nothing but her mind and determination. After finishing her meal, Maya walked through the corridors of the academy toward her next class. The massive station orbited the neutral world of Concordia, designed to be a meeting place where young beings from across the galaxy could learn together. The walls were made of transparent aluminum, offering stunning views of space and the planet below. Other students moved in groups, chattering excitedly about their classes or upcoming events. Maya walked alone, as always. She had tried making friends in her first few weeks, but the other students either ignored her or treated her like a curiosity. The few humans at the academy kept their distance too, afraid that associating with her would make them targets as well. In Advanced Galactic History class, Professor Quilex, a wise old Xanthorian with tentacles instead of arms, was discussing the recent fall of the Hegemony Empire. Maya took her usual seat in the back row, pulling out her datapad to take notes. The collapse of the hegemony was one of the most significant events in recent galactic history, Professor Quilex began, his tentacles gesturing toward a holographic display showing star maps. For over 200 years, they controlled nearly a quarter of the galaxy through fear and oppression. They enslaved entire species, strip-mined worlds, and crushed any resistance with overwhelming military force. Maya's fingers tightened slightly around her stylus, but her expression remained neutral. Around her, other students leaned forward with interest. The fall of the hegemony was still fresh in everyone's memory, having happened only 5 years ago. What made their defeat so remarkable, the professor continued, was that it wasn't accomplished by a massive military alliance or a rebellion with superior technology. Instead, according to intelligence reports, their downfall was orchestrated by a single individual who systematically dismantled their power structure from within. A student near the front raised her hand. "Professor, is it true that this person was never identified? The reports I've read say the hegemony's leaders all claimed they were defeated by a ghost." Professor Quilex's large, dark eyes seemed to twinkle with amusement. "Indeed, Kira. Despite extensive investigations by multiple galactic intelligence agencies, no one has ever determined who was responsible for the hegemony's fall. What we do know is that someone with incredible strategic intelligence and an almost supernatural ability to predict enemy movements managed to turn the hegemony's own systems against them." Behind Maya, she heard Zark whisper to his friends, "Probably some advanced alien species. No way a primitive race could pull off something like that. Humans weren't even part of galactic society back then." Maya almost smiled at the irony. Humans had indeed been part of galactic society 5 years ago, but most people didn't know that, because the human government had worked very hard to keep their involvement in galactic affairs secret. They preferred to let other species underestimate them while they quietly built their strength and influence. The professor continued his lecture, describing how the mysterious figure had infiltrated hegemony military networks, turned their own generals against each other, and exposed corruption that led to massive internal revolts. Within 6 months, an empire that had seemed unshakable for 2 centuries had collapsed completely. The most fascinating aspect, Professor Quilek said, was the restraint shown by this unknown strategist. Despite having the power to destroy the hegemony completely, they chose instead to fracture it into smaller, manageable pieces that could eventually be rehabilitated. This suggests someone with not just tactical brilliance, but also moral wisdom far beyond their years. As the class ended and students began filing out, Maya remained in her seat for a moment, staring at the holographic display still showing the former hegemony territories. Those star maps brought back memories she had tried to keep buried. Memories of sleepless nights spent planning impossible operations, of walking through enemy strongholds while pretending to be someone else entirely. She remembered the weight of responsibility she had carried, knowing that billions of lives depended on her decisions. She remembered the loneliness of working completely alone, unable to trust anyone with her true identity or mission. Most of all, she remembered the moment when she realized that defeating the hegemony wasn't enough. She had to do it in a way that wouldn't just replace one tyrant with another. "Miss Chen?" Professor Quilex's voice brought her back to the present. "Is everything all right? You seem lost in thought." Maya looked up to find the classroom empty except for them. She quickly gathered her things and stood up. "Sorry, Professor. I was just thinking about how incredible it must have been to live through such historic events." The old Zenthorian studied her with those large, knowing eyes. "Indeed. Though I sometimes wonder if the people who make history realize how significant their actions are while they're living through them. Often, the most important figures in galactic events are the ones we never hear about." Maya nodded politely and headed for the door, but something in the professor's tone made her glance back. He was still watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. For a moment she wondered if he somehow knew more than he was letting on, but that was impossible. Her identity had been protected by the highest levels of human intelligence, and she had been careful to create a completely ordinary background for her civilian life. As she walked to her next class, Maya reflected on how strange her life had become. 5 years ago, she had been the most wanted and feared individual in a quarter of the galaxy. Now she was just another student being mocked for her species and background. Sometimes she wasn't sure which life was more difficult to navigate. The next morning brought another round of humiliation for Maya during combat training class. The Academy's training facility was massive, with multiple environments that could simulate different planetary conditions. Today, they were practicing in a standard gravity chamber with various obstacles and defensive positions. Captain Voss, a veteran draconian warrior with silver scales and burning yellow eyes, assigned partners for sparring exercises. As expected, Maya was paired with Throgar, a massive Kandorian who stood nearly 8 feet tall and had muscles that could crush steel. The other students gathered around to watch what they assumed would be a quick and embarrassing defeat for the small human girl. "Try not to hurt her too badly, Throgar," called out Zark with a cruel grin. "Humans break easily, and we don't want to send her to the medical bay again." Throgar looked down at Maya with what might have been sympathy. Despite his intimidating appearance, he was actually one of the kinder students at the academy. "I will be gentle, small one. Perhaps you should ask Captain Voss for a different opponent." Maya adjusted her training gear and looked up at the giant alien with calm eyes. "Thank you for the concern, but I'll be fine. Shall we begin?" Captain Voss blew his whistle and the match started. Throgar moved slowly, clearly trying not to harm Maya, but she surprised everyone by immediately dropping low and sweeping his legs. The massive Kandorian stumbled but didn't fall, his superior balance keeping him upright. Maya flowed around his counterattack like water, her movements precise and economical. What the other students saw was a lucky move followed by desperate dodging. What they couldn't see was Maya analyzing Throgar's fighting style, identifying his patterns and calculating exactly how to use his size and strength against him. This was the same analytical mind that had once predicted the movements of entire star fleets and orchestrated the downfall of an empire. Throgar swung again, this time with more serious intent, but Maya wasn't where his fist landed. She had already moved, using his own momentum to guide him off balance. Within minutes, the 8-foot warrior was on the ground, pinned by techniques he didn't understand, applied by someone who weighed less than half what he did. The training hall fell silent. Captain Voss raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed, while the other students stared in shock. Maya helped Throgar to his feet, offering him a respectful bow that he returned with genuine admiration. "Where did a human learn to fight like that?" Vex asked, her crystalline voice sharp with suspicion. Maya shrugged casually. "My parents thought self-defense was important. There are dangerous creatures on the colony worlds." It wasn't entirely a lie. Maya had indeed learned to fight on colony worlds, but not from her parents. She had learned from necessity during covert operations deep in enemy territory, where a single mistake meant death. She had studied every major fighting style in the galaxy, not from books or teachers, but from combat with their practitioners. After class, Maya was walking to the library when she overheard a conversation that made her pause. 3 senior students, all from influential core world families, were talking in hushed tones near a maintenance alcove. "My father received word from his contacts in military intelligence," one of them was saying. "They're still investigating the hegemony collapse, and they think the person responsible might be hiding in plain sight somewhere." Maya pretended to check her datapad while listening carefully. "That's impossible," replied another student. "Someone with that kind of capability would never be able to blend into normal society. They'd be too valuable to waste on civilian life. Unless," said the third student, "they wanted to disappear completely. Think about it. What better place to hide than somewhere no one would ever look? My mother works for the Galactic Security Council, and she says they've checked every major military academy, every intelligence agency, every research facility in known space. Nothing." Maya continued walking, but their words followed her. She had always known that various agencies were still looking for the architect of the hegemony's downfall. What worried her was how close they seemed to getting to the truth. The whole point of coming to New Geneva Academy was to create a normal life, to put her past behind her and try to be just another student. In the library, Maya found her usual quiet corner and pulled up her assignment for Galactic economics. The topic was the redistribution of resources following the collapse of major political entities, with the hegemony used as a case study. As she read through the material, she couldn't help but notice the inaccuracies in the official reports. The documents claimed the hegemony fell due to internal corruption and external pressure from neighboring systems. They mentioned mysterious coordinated attacks on key infrastructure, but attributed them to various rebel groups working independently. Maya knew the truth was far more complex and far more personal. She had spent 2 years infiltrating every level of hegemony society, from the lowest maintenance worker to the highest government official. She had learned their language, their customs, their fears and weaknesses. She had discovered that the hegemony's power came not from military might alone, but from an intricate web of economic dependencies, political favors, and carefully maintained fear. Breaking that web had required patience, precision, and a willingness to make choices that would haunt her forever. Maya had never wanted to be a destroyer of worlds, but sometimes the only way to save lives was to bring down the systems that threatened them. Her thoughts were interrupted when someone sat down across from her. Maya looked up to see Kira, a Melonian girl with pale blue skin and silver hair who was one of the few students who had never actively mocked her. "That was impressive in combat class today," Kira said quietly. "Throgar has been undefeated for 3 semesters. Maya saved her work and closed her datapad. "He's very skilled. I just got lucky." "That wasn't luck," Kira replied, studying Maya with intelligent violet eyes. "That was training. Serious training. The kind you don't get from self-defense classes on colony worlds." Maya felt a familiar tension in her shoulders, the same feeling she used to get when an operation was about to be compromised. "I'm not sure what you mean." Kira leaned forward slightly. "My species has enhanced pattern recognition abilities. We can see connections and correlations that others miss. When I watch you, I see someone who's constantly analyzing everything around her. The way you position yourself in rooms, how you choose your routes through the corridors, the way you eat your food while keeping track of everyone nearby. These aren't the habits of a normal student." Maya's mind raced through possible responses. Kira was clearly more perceptive than she had realized, but how much did she actually know and how much was just suspicion? "You're imagining things," Maya said calmly. "I'm just careful. Growing up on frontier worlds teaches you to be aware of your surroundings." "Maybe," Kira said, but her expression suggested she wasn't convinced. "Or maybe you're someone who learned to be careful for entirely different reasons." someone who had to develop these habits to survive in much more dangerous situations than frontier worlds typically offer. Before Maya could respond, Kira stood up and gathered her things. "I'm not going to say anything to anyone," she said softly. "But you should know that if someone like me can see these patterns, others might notice them too. Whatever you're hiding, you might want to be more careful about it." As Kira walked away, Maya sat alone in the library, staring at her reflection in the dark window. Outside, stars wheeled slowly through space, the same stars that had once looked down on her as she moved through the shadows of a dying empire. She had thought she could leave that life behind, but maybe some things were impossible to escape. That evening, Maya lay in her small dormitory room, staring at the ceiling while her roommate slept peacefully in the next bed. Jenna was a human girl from Earth, who spent most of her time gossiping about other students and complaining about the academy's food. She was everything Maya had once thought she might be able to become: normal, carefree, unburdened by the weight of terrible knowledge. But as Maya listened to the quiet hum of the station's life support systems, she realized that normalcy might be more elusive than she had hoped. The habits and instincts that had kept her alive during her war against the hegemony weren't things she could simply turn off. They were part of who she had become, and maybe part of who she would always be. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new attempts to blend in, and new risks of discovery. Maya closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her dreams were filled with the ghosts of an empire she had destroyed and the lives she had saved by doing so. The emergency alarm woke Maya from a restless sleep. Red lights flashed through the dormitory as students stumbled out of their beds, confused and frightened. The academy's speakers crackled to life with Captain Voss's commanding voice. "All students report to designated emergency stations immediately. This is not a drill. We have hostile vessels approaching the station." Maya was already pulling on her clothes while other students around her panicked. Jenna grabbed her arm with trembling hands. "What's happening?" "Are we under attack?" "Unknown ships," Maya replied calmly, though her mind was already racing through tactical possibilities. "Follow emergency protocols and stay with your assigned group." The corridors filled with students and faculty members moving toward the emergency stations. Maya noticed how poorly organized the evacuation was, people bumping into each other and clogging the main passages. In her old life, she would have had contingency plans for exactly this situation. Multiple escape routes mapped out and emergency supplies pre-positioned. At the emergency station, Professor Quilex was trying to maintain order among the frightened students. Through the large windows, Maya could see 3 ships approaching the academy station. They were sleek and dark with designs she didn't recognize, but their aggressive posture was unmistakable. "Everyone remain calm," Professor Quilex announced. "Academy security is handling the situation. These ships have not responded to our communications, but they haven't made any overtly hostile moves either." Maya studied the approaching vessels more carefully. Their configuration suggested advanced technology, possibly beyond anything the current galactic powers possessed. The way they moved in perfect formation indicated highly skilled pilots or advanced automated systems. Most concerning was their stealth approach. For them to get this close without detection meant they had technology that could bypass the Academy's sophisticated sensor arrays. Suddenly, the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in a dim red glow. The communication systems crackled with static and then fell silent completely. "They're jamming our communications." Captain Voss's voice came over the internal speakers. "All students remain at emergency stations until further notice." In the red-lit darkness, Maya could see her classmates' faces tight with fear. Zark, who had spent so much time mocking her, was now pale and shaking. Throgar stood protectively near the younger students, his warrior instincts activated by the threat. Even Kira looked worried, though she kept glancing at Maya with a curious expression. Maya moved quietly toward one of the emergency access panels. If these unknown ships were hostile, the students would need more than just designated gathering points to stay safe. She needed to know what kind of defenses the Academy had, and whether they would be sufficient. "What are you doing?" Kira appeared beside her, speaking in a whisper. "Checking the emergency systems," Maya replied, her fingers working on the access panel's controls with practiced efficiency. "You know how to access Academy security systems?" Kira's violet eyes reflected the red emergency lighting. Maya realized she had made another mistake. A normal student wouldn't know how to bypass security locks or navigate complex system interfaces. Basic emergency protocols, she said. Everyone should know how to check life support status during emergencies. But even as she spoke, Maya's fingers were doing much more than checking life support. She was accessing the Academy's defensive systems, analyzing their capabilities and mapping the station's vulnerabilities. What she found was disturbing. The Academy had minimal defenses, designed more for deterring pirates than repelling a serious military assault. The attacking ships were now close enough for detailed scanning. Maya studied their approach patterns and weapon configurations through the security monitors. These weren't random raiders or pirates. They moved with military precision and had technology that suggested significant resources and planning. "Professor Quilex," Maya called out, her voice carrying clearly through the emergency station. "We need to evacuate the outer sections of the Academy. Those ships are positioning for a boarding action, not a direct assault." Everyone turned to look at her. Professor Qualex's tentacles waved in surprise. "Miss Chen, how could you possibly know their intentions?" Maya realized she had revealed too much knowledge again, but there wasn't time to worry about maintaining her cover. If she was right about the attackers' intentions, lives were at stake. "Their formation and approach vector," she explained quickly. "They're not positioned for orbital bombardment. They're coming in at angles that would allow them to dock with the Academy's airlocks. This is a capture operation, not a destruction mission." Captain Voss, who had arrived at the emergency station, studied Maya with new interest. "That's a sophisticated tactical analysis, Miss Chen. Where did you learn to read battle formations?" Before Maya could answer, the Academy shuddered as something attached to the outer hull. The emergency lights flickered, and they could hear the distinctive sound of cutting tools working on the station's exterior. "They're breaching the outer hull," Maya said. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they're inside." Captain Voss immediately began issuing orders. "Emergency teams to the outer sections. Prepare to seal the blast doors. All students move to the inner core stations." As the group began moving deeper into the Academy, Maya noticed that Kira was staying close to her. "You knew this was going to happen," the Melonian girl said quietly. "I suspected it was a possibility based on their approach," Maya replied. "No," Kira shook her head. "You knew. The way you positioned yourself near the access panel before the lights went out. How you were already checking the defensive systems before anyone else realized what was happening. You've been through this before." Maya didn't answer, but she couldn't deny that Kira's pattern recognition abilities were proving problematic. The truth was that Maya had indeed been through situations like this before, both as an infiltrator and as a target. She knew how boarding operations worked because she had planned and executed them herself. The sound of explosions echoed through the station as the attackers breached the outer defenses. Emergency announcements filled the corridors, directing students and faculty to the most secure areas of the Academy. Maya found herself analyzing the situation from multiple perspectives simultaneously. As a student trying to survive, as a former operative assessing the threat, and as someone who had intimate knowledge of how such operations could be countered. "Maya," Throgar's deep voice rumbled beside her. "In combat class, you fought like someone who had seen real battle. Not training, but actual combat. Who are you, really?" Maya looked up at the massive Kandorian warrior. His yellow eyes held no suspicion, only respect and curiosity. Around them, other students were beginning to look at her differently as well. Her tactical knowledge and calm demeanor under pressure were making them reconsider their assumptions about the quiet human girl they had dismissed. "I'm someone who wants to help keep everyone safe," Maya said finally. It wasn't a complete answer, but it was the truth. Another explosion, closer this time. The attackers were making rapid progress through the Academy's defenses. Maya could hear the distinctive sound of energy weapons firing, followed by the heavier reports of the Academy's defensive systems responding. "The central core has the strongest defenses," Maya said to Captain Voss. "But if these attackers have been planning this operation, they'll have accounted for that. We need alternate escape routes in case they breach the core defenses." Captain Voss nodded grimly. "You seem to know a great deal about assault tactics, Miss Chen. Perhaps you'd be willing to share more of your insights." Maya hesitated. Every tactical suggestion she made would reveal more about her background and expertise. But as the sounds of battle grew closer, she realized that her classmates' lives were more important than maintaining her cover. They'll try to take the command center first, she said. That will give them control of the station's systems and allow them to trap us in the inner core. We need to either retake the command center or find a way to disable it from here to prevent them from using it against us. The lights flickered again, and this time they didn't come back on immediately. In the darkness, Maya could hear her classmates' frightened whispers and the distant sounds of the ongoing battle. She closed her eyes and let her tactical mind work through the possibilities. When the emergency lighting returned, Maya opened her eyes to find everyone looking at her expectantly. Somehow, without anyone officially deciding it, she had become the person they were turning to for answers. The quiet, mocked human girl had suddenly become their tactical advisor in a crisis. Maya took a deep breath. She could continue trying to hide her abilities and hope that the Academy's security forces could handle the situation, or she could step forward and take the kind of active role that had once brought down an empire. Looking at the frightened faces around her, the choice became clear. "There's something I need to tell you all," Maya said quietly. "I'm not exactly who I've been pretending to be." The Academy's maintenance tunnels were never meant for combat. They were cramped, dark, and filled with pipes that leaked coolant and steam. For most species, they were a nightmare to navigate. For Sarah Chen, they were home. "Watch the third pipe," she whispered, guiding Vraxtor's bulk through a narrow passage. "It's superheated." The Vraxian squeezed through, his scales scraping against metal. Behind them, the other cadets followed in single file, a ragtag group wearing stolen enemy armor, carrying weapons they'd only fired in simulations. "How do you know these tunnels so well?" Zara asked. "First thing I did when I arrived," Sarah replied. "Map every corridor, every access point, every blind spot." "Why?" "Because Mars Station fell when they came through the maintenance systems. Dad always said." She stopped herself. They'd been moving for 20 minutes, following Sarah's lead through the labyrinth beneath the Academy. Above them they could hear explosions, plasma fire, and worse, the screams that suddenly cut off. "Here," Sarah said, stopping at a junction. She pulled out the enemy communicator and listened to the clicking patterns. "They're moving captives to the main auditorium." "Captives?" The injured Bendathi's translator gurgled. "Not killing?" "Not yet." Sarah's voice was grim. "The Devourers don't just feed on biomass. They're selective. They process fear, adrenaline. The biochemistry of terror makes the feeding more efficient." "That's sick," one of the Zilani said. "That's evolution." Sarah checked her weapon. "They learned from Mars. Quick kills waste potential. Better to harvest slowly." "You sound like you admire them," Vraxtor accused. "I respect them," Sarah corrected. "Admiration is for beauty. Respect is for things that can kill you." She turned to the group. "The auditorium has 4 main entrances, 2 service doors, and 1 emergency exit. They'll guard the main points but probably ignore the service areas. Too small for most species. Too small for us, too," the Karathi pointed out. "For you." Sarah looked at Zara. "But not for humans. You want us to go in alone?" "Not alone. You'll have backup." Sarah pulled out several devices from her pack. Small cylindrical objects that looked homemade. Plasma charges. Low yield but in an enclosed space. "Those aren't Academy issue," Vraxtor observed. "No, they're not." Sarah handed them to Zara. "Remember the Kelvar theorem. What's the third principle?" "The enemy's strength becomes their weakness," Zara recited. "The Devourers bunch their captives together. Makes them easier to guard, easier to process. But it also makes them vulnerable to area effects," Zara finished. "But if we use plasma charges, we'll kill the captives too." "Not these." Sarah showed her the settings. "They're modified. EMP burst followed by flashbang. Devourers use bioelectric fields for close communication. Disrupt that, and they're blind and deaf for 30 seconds. 45, actually. I've tested it." The group exchanged glances. When had the quiet cadet been testing homemade weapons against Devourer physiology? "The rest of us?" Vraxtor asked. "You'll be at the main entrances. The charges will drive them toward you. Bottleneck formation. Use the doorways as kill zones." She drew quick diagrams on her datapad. "Korathi, you're our best shot. Elevated position here. Priority targets are the commanders. They'll have red markings on their armor. How do you know their command structure?" Sarah just looked at him. The Korathi didn't ask again. "What about you?" Vraxtor pressed. "I'll be handling the emergency exit, alone." "Yes, that's suicide." If they run, they won't run. Sarah's voice was certain. Devourers don't retreat from prey. It's not in their psychology. They'll rush the threats, try to overwhelm us with numbers. She paused. That's what we're counting on. They spent the next 10 minutes preparing. Sarah showed each cadet weak points in Devourer armor, firing patterns that would maximize damage, how to reload under pressure. She was patient but precise, correcting grips and stances with an instructor's eye. You've done this before, Vraxtor said. It wasn't a question. We all have our stories, Sarah replied. Yours is about honor and glory. Mine is about survival. They reached the service corridor beneath the auditorium. Through the grates, they could hear the sounds. Hundreds of beings crowded together, crying, pleading. And over it all, the clicking communication of their captors. Sarah listened intently. 40 devourers. Maybe 50. They're preparing for processing. We can't fight 50, the Zilani whispered. Mars Station fought thousands, Sarah said, with mining equipment and improvised weapons. You have military hardware and the element of surprise. Mars Station also had soldiers. No. Sarah's voice was quiet. Mars Station had families, mothers, fathers, children. She looked at each of them. The soldiers died in the first wave. It was the civilians who held the line. She turned to Zara. 2 minutes after you deploy the charges. No matter what you hear, what you see. 2 minutes. Zara nodded, gripping the charges tightly. Everyone else, positions. Remember? Controlled bursts, watch your ammunition, keep the doorways clear for crossfire. Sarah started to move away. Wait, Vraxtor called. What if this doesn't work? Sarah looked back. Then you'll die knowing you tried. That's better than dying in a cage. They separated. Sarah moved through the tunnels with purpose, every step calculated. She could hear her father's voice in her memory. Fear is data, baby girl. It tells you what matters. Use it, don't let it use you. She'd been 14 when he'd said that. 2 hours before the Devourers breached the Mars Station perimeter. The emergency exit was exactly where the schematics said it would be. Sarah took position, checked her weapons, and waited. Through the walls, she could hear Zara and the Bendathi moving into position. The Bendathi's suit had been patched, but it still leaked. They'd left a trail. The Devourers would smell it eventually. 1 minute. Sarah breathed steadily. In, out, in, out. The way her mother had taught her in the tunnels of Mars, when the air recyclers had failed and every breath mattered. 30 seconds. The clicking got louder. More agitated. They'd noticed something. 10 seconds. Sarah heard Zara's voice, faint through the walls. For Earth, for Mars, for everyone you've taken. The charges detonated. The explosion wasn't large. Sarah had been precise about that. But the EMP pulse ripped through the auditorium, followed immediately by blinding light and deafening sound. The clicking communication turned to screeches of pain and confusion. Then came the plasma fire. Short, controlled bursts from the doorways, the cadets following her instructions, turning the entrances into killing fields. Sarah counted in her head. The Devourers would be disoriented for 45 seconds. After that, they'd adapt, regroup, overwhelm the cadet positions through sheer numbers, unless they had somewhere else to go. She heard them before she saw them, the scrambling of claws on metal. The panic breathing of predators suddenly turned prey. The emergency exit burst open and Devourers poured out. Sarah opened fire. The first 3 dropped before they knew she was there. The next 2 managed to raise their weapons before precise shots took them in the joints, dropping them screaming. More came, pushing past their fallen, trying to escape the kill zone inside only to find death waiting outside. Sarah moved between positions she'd mapped while the others prepared. Fire, displace, fire again. Never from the same angle twice. To the Devourers, it must have seemed like a squad, not a single human. Her weapon clicked empty. She dropped it, pulled her secondary, kept firing. A Devourer commander, red markings just as she'd predicted, tried to rally the others. Sarah put 2 shots through its head, then rolled to avoid the return fire from its guards. Pain flared across her ribs. Plasma burn, not deep but enough to slow her. She kept moving. More Devourers fell. Some tried to retreat back inside, only to meet the concentrated fire from the doorways. Others pushed forward, desperate to escape. Sarah let them come, drew them out, made them bunch up in the narrow exit. Then she triggered the real surprise. charges she'd planted while the others took positions. The explosion collapsed the exit, crushing a dozen devourers and trapping the rest inside with the cadets. Silence fell. Sarah limped toward the auditorium, reloading as she walked. Inside, she found organized chaos. The cadets held their positions, weapons trained on the few devourers who'd survived. Captives huddled in groups, shocked but alive. "Clear?" she called. "Clear!" Vraxtor responded. His armor was scorched, but he was standing. Captives? Minor injuries. No casualties. Sarah nodded and immediately began checking the fallen devourers, putting rounds into any that still moved. The cadets watched in shock as she methodically ensured each enemy was dead. "They're already down," the Karathi protested. "Down isn't dead," Sarah replied. "And dead doesn't always stay that way with devourers. They can regenerate from wounds that would kill most species. Always confirm the kill." She found what she was looking for on the commander's body, a communication node more sophisticated than the handheld units. She accessed it, listening to the chatter. "Problem?" Vraxtor asked, noting her expression. "This was just one squad," Sarah said. "There are 6 more in the academy, and they've already taken the hangars. So we're trapped?" Sarah looked at the node again, then at the cadets who'd just survived their first real combat. They were scared, hurt, but still standing. "Still ready?" "No," she said. "We're not trapped." "Then what are we?" Zara asked. Sarah almost smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Maya moved through the darkened corridors with the fluid grace of someone who had spent years navigating hostile territory. Behind her, Kira, Throgar, Zark, and Vex followed in single file, their footsteps surprisingly quiet for a group of academy students. Maya had quickly taught them basic stealth movement and hand signals, and they had adapted faster than she had expected. The academy's corridors looked different in the emergency lighting. Shadows created hiding places and potential ambush points that Maya's tactical mind automatically cataloged. She could hear the distant sounds of combat from the direction of the command center, which meant Captain Voss's team was engaging the attackers. That would provide useful distraction for her group's mission. Their first objective was the primary data hub, a heavily secured area that controlled the Academy's computer networks. If Maya could access it, she could potentially disrupt the attackers' ability to coordinate their assault and gather intelligence about who they were and what they wanted. As they approached the data hub, Maya held up her hand in a stop signal. Through the transparent aluminum windows ahead, she could see 2 figures in dark armor standing guard outside the entrance. Their equipment was definitely military grade, with advanced sensors and weapons that confirmed these weren't ordinary pirates or raiders. Maya studied the guards carefully, noting their positioning, equipment, and patrol patterns. After several minutes of observation, she signaled her team to move closer to a maintenance alcove where they could communicate in whispers. 2 guards. "Professional equipment, standard defensive positions," she whispered. "They're expecting trouble from the main corridors, not from above or below." "Above or below?" Zark whispered back, looking confused. Maya pointed upward. "Maintenance shafts. The Academy's life support systems require regular access, so there are service tunnels throughout the station. We can bypass the guards entirely." She led them to a nearby maintenance panel, quickly accessing the manual override codes. As the panel slid open, revealing a narrow shaft leading upward, Throgar looked skeptical. "I am not sure I will fit," the massive Kandorian rumbled softly. "You'll fit," Maya assured him. "Trust me. I've had to move through tighter spaces than this." As they climbed through the maintenance shaft, Maya couldn't help but remember similar infiltrations during her war against the hegemony. She had spent countless hours crawling through ventilation systems, service tunnels, and utility passages to reach her objectives. The difference now was that she wasn't alone, and the stakes were more personal. They emerged in the data hub through a ceiling access panel, dropping down into a room filled with humming servers and data processing equipment. Maya immediately moved to the main terminal, while her teammates kept watch at the entrances. Her fingers flew across the control interface with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, she had bypassed the security protocols and gained access to the Academy's central computer systems. What she found there made her pause in surprise. "These attackers aren't random," she said quietly. "They've been planning this operation for weeks, maybe months. They have detailed schematics of the Academy, student and faculty records, and specific targeting information." "Targeting information?" Kira asked, moving closer to look at the data. Maya's blood ran cold as she read through the files. They're not here to rob the academy or take hostages for ransom. They're looking for someone specific, someone who's supposed to be a student here. She scrolled through more data and her worst fears were confirmed. The attackers had detailed intelligence files on several students, but one file was much larger than the others. A file with her photograph and the name Target Primary, Maya Chen, alias unknown, suspected architect of hegemony collapse. They're here for me, Maya said quietly. The room fell silent except for the humming of the computer equipment. Maya continued reading through the intelligence files, learning more about how thoroughly her cover had been compromised. How did they find you? Vex asked, her crystalline voice tight with concern. I'm not sure, Maya replied, though she was already forming theories. I was careful when I created my civilian identity, but no cover is perfect forever. Someone connected the dots. Throgar moved closer, his massive presence somehow comforting rather than threatening. If they are here for you, then helping us escape is putting you at greater risk. Maya looked up at her classmates, seeing genuine concern in their faces. These were the same students who had mocked her for being human just days ago, and now they were worried about her safety. The risk was always there, she said. At least now I know what I'm dealing with. And I'm not running anymore. She turned back to the computer terminal and began accessing deeper systems. If they want to find me, they're going to have to work for it. And I'm going to make sure they regret coming here. Maya's fingers moved across the controls with increasing speed and intensity. She was accessing every system the attackers might use against them, planting viruses and logic bombs that would activate on her command. She was also gathering intelligence on the attackers themselves, learning about their capabilities and weaknesses. What are you doing? Zark asked, watching her work with fascination. What I should have done 5 years ago, Maya replied. I brought down the hegemony, but I didn't eliminate the threat they represented. I broke them apart and hoped the pieces would stay broken. Clearly, some of those pieces have reformed into something new. As she worked, Maya began to piece together the larger picture. The attackers weren't just mercenaries or bounty hunters. They were organized, well-funded, and had access to intelligence resources that suggested government backing. Someone wanted her found and captured, and they were willing to attack a neutral academy to do it. There, Maya said finally, stepping back from the terminal. I've planted enough surprises in their systems to keep them busy, and I've gathered intelligence on their operation. Now we need to link up with the other teams and coordinate our response. Response? Kira asked. I thought we were trying to escape. Maya's expression hardened in a way that reminded her classmates that this quiet girl had once brought down an empire. We were, but now I know they're here specifically for me, which changes everything. These people attacked my school and threatened my friends. That was a mistake. As they prepared to leave the data hub, Maya felt the familiar transformation that occurred when she shifted from civilian to operative mode. The part of her that had once terrified the most powerful empire in the galaxy was awakening. And for the first time in years, she wasn't trying to suppress it. Her classmates could sense the change in her demeanor. The quiet, careful student they had known was still there, but underneath was something much more dangerous. Something that had earned its reputation by doing the impossible. Maya, Kira said softly as they prepared to move out. When you brought down the hegemony, were you alone the whole time? Maya paused at the exit, her hand on the door control. Yes, completely alone. It was the only way to maintain operational security. Well, Throgar said, his deep voice rumbling with determination, you are not alone this time. Maya looked back at her teammates and realized that something fundamental had changed. For the first time since she was 12 years old, she had people she could trust watching her back. The thought was both terrifying and liberating. As they moved back into the darkened corridors, Maya began planning their next moves. The attackers had come looking for the person who had destroyed the hegemony. They were about to discover that finding her and capturing her were two very different things. Maya led her team through the maintenance passages toward the command center, where they could hear the sounds of ongoing battle. Her mind was working on multiple levels simultaneously: tactical planning, threat assessment, and the growing realization that her carefully constructed new life was completely shattered. As they moved, she used her communicator to contact Captain Voss's team. The device crackled with static before his voice came through. Maya, where are you? We're pinned down outside the command center. These attackers have equipment I've never seen before. I'm en route to your position, Maya replied. What's your tactical situation? 3 of my team are wounded. The attackers have energy shields that our weapons can't penetrate effectively. They're using some kind of adaptive armor technology. Maya's blood ran cold. Adaptive armor was experimental technology that only a few organizations in the galaxy possessed. The fact that these attackers had it confirmed her worst suspicions about who was hunting her. Captain, pull your team back to defensive positions, she said. I have new intelligence about our attackers and I need to share it with everyone. 20 minutes later, Maya's team had linked up with the survivors from both other groups. They gathered in a secure maintenance area deep within the Academy's inner hull. Captain Voss had a plasma burn on his left arm, and several students were nursing various injuries, but everyone was alive. Report, Captain Voss said, looking at Maya with the respect of one military professional addressing another. The attackers are here specifically for me, Maya began, addressing the assembled group. They have detailed intelligence on my identity and background. This isn't a random attack. It's a targeted operation. Professor Quilex's tentacles moved in patterns of concern. But how could anyone have discovered your true identity? Surely your government would have protected your civilian cover. Maya shook her head. My government doesn't know where I am. When I finished my mission against the hegemony, I disappeared completely. I created my own civilian identity without official support or protection. Why? Kira asked. Why give up the protection and support you had earned? Maya was quiet for a moment, remembering the conversations with intelligence officials who had wanted to use her abilities for other missions. Other wars, because I didn't want to spend the rest of my life being a weapon. I wanted to try being a normal person. Zark, who had been unusually quiet since learning Maya's true identity, finally spoke up. So what you're saying is that some of the most dangerous people in the galaxy have found you, and we're trapped on a space station with them. That's an accurate assessment, Maya replied calmly. And our chances of survival? Vex asked, her crystalline form reflecting the dim emergency lighting. Maya studied the tactical situation in her mind, running through scenarios and possibilities. If we try to hide or run, our chances are minimal. They have superior equipment, detailed knowledge of the station, and they're professionals. However, they have one significant weakness. What's that? Captain Voss asked. They're expecting to fight the Maya Chen who destroyed the hegemony 5 years ago. A 12-year-old girl working alone with minimal resources. They're not prepared for what I've become. And they definitely aren't prepared for me to have allies. Maya moved to a wall display and began sketching out a tactical plan. The attackers have taken the command center and established defensive positions throughout the academy. But they're spread thin, and they're focused on finding me rather than securing their own positions. What are you proposing? Professor Quilex asked. We're going to turn the tables, Maya said. Instead of them hunting me, I'm going to hunt them. But this time I won't be doing it alone. She outlined her plan quickly and efficiently. It was complex, requiring precise timing and coordination, but it played to their advantages while exploiting the attackers' weaknesses. This is incredibly dangerous, Captain Voss observed. You're asking students to engage in direct combat with professional soldiers. I'm asking my friends to help me protect our school, Maya replied. But I won't order anyone to participate. This has to be a choice. One by one, her classmates stepped forward to volunteer. Even Zark, despite his obvious fear, nodded his agreement. If you can bring down an empire, maybe you can get us out of this mess too. As they prepared to execute the plan, Maya pulled Kira aside. I need you to know something. If this goes wrong, if I don't make it out, there are people who need to know what happened here. My real identity, my location, everything. That information could be valuable to certain intelligence agencies. Kira studied Maya's face carefully. You're planning something you don't expect to survive. I'm planning to do whatever it takes to keep everyone safe, Maya replied. Sometimes that means taking calculated risks. The Maya Chen who destroyed the hegemony might have worked alone, Kira said firmly. But you're not alone anymore. We're not just going to let you sacrifice yourself to save us. Maya felt something shift inside her at those words. For 5 years, she had carried the weight of her past actions alone. The responsibility, the guilt, the knowledge of what she was capable of, all of it had been hers to bear in isolation. Now, surrounded by classmates who had chosen to stand with her despite the danger, she realized that maybe she didn't have to carry that weight alone anymore. All right, Maya said finally. We do this together. But if I give an order during the operation, you follow it immediately. Lives depend on split-second timing. As they moved into position for the first phase of their counterattack, Maya felt the familiar rush of adrenaline and focus that came with dangerous operations. But this time there was something else. The comforting knowledge that she had people watching her back. The attackers had come to the academy expecting to capture a legendary figure from galactic history. Instead, they were about to discover that legends could evolve, and that the quiet human girl they were hunting had learned to be something even more dangerous than she had been alone. A leader with people worth fighting for. Maya checked her improvised equipment one last time and looked around at her teammates. 5 years ago, she had brought down an empire to save people she would never meet. Tonight, she was going to save people she had come to care about deeply. The hunt was about to begin, but this time Maya Chen was the hunter, not the prey. As they moved toward their first objective, Maya felt a sense of completion she hadn't experienced since the fall of the hegemony. She had tried to leave her old life behind, but maybe the answer wasn't to abandon her abilities entirely. Maybe the answer was to use them for something more personal, more immediate, more real than the abstract concept of galactic justice. Tonight, she wasn't fighting for the freedom of billions of strangers. Tonight, she was fighting for her friends, her school, and the life she had tried to build. And that, she realized, might make her more dangerous than she had ever been before. The counterattack began at exactly 0300 station time. Maya had divided her combined teams into 3 coordinated strike groups, each with specific objectives designed to confuse and overwhelm the attackers. She led the primary assault team, which included Throgar and Captain Voss, while Kira commanded the technical warfare group with Professor Quilex, and Zark led the distraction team with Vex and the remaining students. Maya's group moved through the maintenance passages toward the attackers' main staging area. Through careful observation, she had identified their command post in what used to be the Academy's main conference room. Taking out their coordination center would cripple their ability to respond effectively to multiple simultaneous threats. As they approached their target, Maya felt the familiar calm that came over her during critical operations. Her mind was crystal clear, processing multiple streams of information simultaneously, the sounds of movement ahead, the tactical updates from her other teams, the structural layout of their environment, and the probable responses their enemies would make to each action. "Contact in 30 seconds, she whispered into her communicator, alerting the other teams. Through a ventilation grate, Maya could see 6 attackers in the conference room, their adaptive armor gleaming dully in the emergency lighting. Their equipment was even more advanced than she had initially assessed, which confirmed her suspicions about who was funding this operation. Only 3 organizations in known space had access to this level of military technology, and 2 of them were supposed to be allies of the Galactic Federation. Maya hand-signaled her intentions to Throgar and Captain Voss. The plan required precise timing and flawless execution. One mistake could result in casualties among her friends, which was unacceptable. At exactly 0300, all 3 teams struck simultaneously. Maya's group breached the conference room from above, while Kira's team launched a coordinated cyber attack against the attackers' communication systems. Zark's team began their diversionary assault on the opposite side of the academy, drawing attention away from the main objectives. The attackers in the conference room reacted with professional speed, but Maya had anticipated their responses. She had studied their movement patterns, their communication protocols, and their tactical doctrines during her reconnaissance. More importantly, she understood something about them that they didn't understand about themselves. They were operating according to standard military procedures designed for conventional warfare, not the kind of asymmetric tactics that had brought down the hegemony. Maya dropped through the ceiling directly onto the largest attacker, using his body to shield herself from his companion's weapons fire. Before he could react, she had disabled his armor's power systems and appropriated his sidearm. Throgar smashed through a wall panel with controlled violence, his massive frame absorbing energy blasts that would have killed a smaller being. Captain Voss provided covering fire with remarkable accuracy for someone using unfamiliar captured weapons. Within 90 seconds, the conference room was secure. Maya immediately moved to the attackers' communication equipment, her fingers flying across controls as she accessed their operational network. "Kira, I'm uploading their communication protocols to you now. she said into her headset. Can you intercept their coordination traffic? Already on it, Kira's voice came back. Maya, you need to see what I found in their data systems. These people aren't just looking for you. They're working for someone who wants to rebuild the hegemony. Maya felt ice forming in her stomach. Impossible. I made sure the hegemony couldn't be rebuilt. I destroyed their core infrastructure, their leadership networks, their economic foundations. Apparently you missed something, Kira replied. There's a whole organization calling itself the New Hegemony, and they've been gathering resources and supporters for years. Finding you is just the first step in their plan for revenge. As Maya processed this information, she realized that her war against the hegemony wasn't over. It had simply moved into a new phase, one that threatened not just her but everyone she had come to care about. All teams, new intelligence, she announced. Our attackers are advanced scouts for a larger organization. We need to capture their leaders alive for interrogation. The battle for the academy continued for another 2 hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt once Maya had committed fully to the fight. The attackers were skilled professionals, but they were fighting on unfamiliar ground against opponents who knew every corridor, every system, every potential advantage the station offered. More importantly, they were fighting against someone who had already defeated their predecessors and learned from the experience. By 0500, the academy was secure. The surviving attackers were in custody, their equipment confiscated and their ship captured intact. Maya stood in the main corridor, surrounded by her classmates and faculty members, trying to process what had just happened. So, Zark said, breaking the exhausted silence. When you said you brought down the hegemony, you weren't exaggerating. Maya looked around at her friends, seeing new respect in their eyes, but also something more important. Acceptance. They had seen her at her most dangerous, had witnessed capabilities that set her apart from normal people, and they still saw her as Maya, their classmate and friend. No, she said quietly, I wasn't exaggerating, but I was wrong about something important. I thought destroying the hegemony was enough. I thought if I broke them apart completely, the threat would be over. Clearly, I was mistaken. Professor Quilex approached, his ancient eyes filled with understanding. You were young when you took on that responsibility. No one could have anticipated every possible consequence. The question now, Captain Voss said, is what happens next? These attackers were just the beginning. If there really is a new hegemony organization, they'll send more people. Maya nodded, her mind already working through implications and possibilities. Yes, they will. Which means I can't stay here. My presence puts everyone at the academy at risk. Where will you go? Kira asked. Maya looked out through the large windows at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the remnants of the organization she thought she had destroyed were regrouping and planning their revenge. The quiet civilian life she had tried to build was over. Probably forever. I'm going hunting, she said finally. The new hegemony wants to find me? Good, but this time I won't be running and hiding. This time I'm going to find them first. Throgar stepped forward, his massive presence somehow comforting. You said earlier that you worked alone when you fought the hegemony the first time. That's right. And you said it was lonely. Maya nodded, remembering the isolation and the weight of carrying such responsibility without anyone to share it with. Then perhaps, Throgar continued, you should consider a different approach this time. Maya looked around at her classmates, understanding what he was suggesting. These people had chosen to stand with her when everything went wrong. They had risked their lives to fight beside her, and they had proven themselves capable and trustworthy. Are you suggesting you want to come with me? She asked. We're suggesting, Kira said, speaking for the group, that whatever comes next, you don't have to face it alone. You said earlier that age doesn't determine capability. Well, species doesn't determine loyalty, and students don't have to stay students forever. Maya felt tears forming in her eyes for the first time in years. When she had destroyed the hegemony, she had saved billions of lives but lost her own childhood and innocence in the process. She had thought that was a fair trade, but now she realized she might have been wrong about that too. Maybe the most important thing she had gained from her time at the academy wasn't the attempt at a normal life. Maybe it was the discovery that she could trust other people, that she could have friends and allies who would choose to stand with her not because they had to, but because they wanted to. 3 months ago, Maya Chen had been a lonely girl trying to hide from her past. Now she was the leader of a team that had chosen to follow her into an uncertain and dangerous future. The new hegemony wanted a war with the person who had destroyed their predecessors. They were about to discover that this time, she wouldn't be fighting alone. As Maya began planning their next moves, she realized that the mockery and isolation she had endured at the academy had taught her something valuable: the difference between being alone and being lonely. She had been alone when she fought the hegemony, but she had also been lonely. Now she had people she could trust, people who knew exactly who she was and had chosen to stand with her anyway. The girl who had once toppled an empire was about to become something even more dangerous: a leader with a cause and friends worth fighting for. The new hegemony had made a critical error in coming after her. They had given her a reason to stop hiding and start fighting again, and this time Maya Chen would finish what she started.